Today I will present two cases that happened in Russia. The first case in 2020 and the second in 2021, where the characters of each story were men who, desperate and acting on the circumstances of the moment, sought revenge. Today you will know the story of Vladimir Sankin and Vyacheslav Matrosov, who ended up, unintentionally, taking the lives of two abusers, and because of that, they were arrested. Vladimir Sankin was a 33-year-old man when this incident took place. He lived in the city of Ufa in Russia and worked as a mechanic. On January 30th, 2020, it was winter in Russia. Vladimir was returning home at around 7 p.m. after a long day at work. A 10-year-old child dressed only in his underwear ran down the street towards him. This child said a man locked him and his friend in a house, told them to take off their clothes and threatened them with an axe. The boy had managed to escape, but his friend was still there. Vladimir immediately called the police while following the child directions to the house. On arriving, he heard a child crying inside. He broke down the door and found a young boy in total despair, naked in the corner of the room. In another room, there was a 50-year-old male. Vladimir pulled the criminal out of the house and beat him, landing several blows with his hands, feet, and a piece of thick branch that was right there at the door. The police arrived quickly, but it was too late. The criminal had died from his injuries. This man was identified as 54-year-old Vladimir Zaitsev, a criminal with an extensive history of abusing minors, including his own son. Zaitsev had already served 17 years in prison for previous convictions for child abuse and masochistic sexual acts. Both boys have not been named. Despite the heroic act of saving two children, Vladimir was prosecuted for taking the life of a third party and was immediately sent to prison. He was arrested and kept in a detention house to await a preliminary hearing, where he would know whether he would await the main trial under house arrest or in jail. The hearing took place weeks later and lasted 8 hours. It was decided that he should go to jail until the trial. The prosecution asked that Vladimir be sentenced to 15 years in prison for his actions. In reports and testimonies, he admitted that he did not expect the man to die and insisted that he believed his actions were heroic. Everyone could only see what he did in that moment when he was out of his mind, but they had forgotten what caused it. He added that he had to make a choice: follow his path to go home and ignore the situation or save the boys. He couldn't have done anything else in that situation but save the kids. A wave of protests took place in Russia in support of Vladimir Sankin, and a petition was signed by over 70,000 people. His wife, Polina Naumova, also declared her support for her husband in an interview with The Mirror, saying that she was totally on his side for not abandoning the boys, because nobody knows what would have happened if he had turned a blind eye. On January 14th, 2021, the trial took place and Vladimir ended up being accused and convicted of the crime of intentional act of serious bodily harm, resulting in the death of the victim through negligence. His lawyers filed an appeal, but until a new hearing is scheduled, Vladimir Sankin is still in prison. This story took place in September 2021 in the village of Vintai in the southeast of the Samara region, Russia. In the course of my research, I couldn't find much personal information about Vyacheslav other than that he worked at a rocket factory, was married to a woman named Natalia, with whom he had 2 daughters. He was a lifelong friend of Oleg Sviridov. Oleg was the godfather to one of Vyacheslav's daughters and had taken care of the girl several times when Vyacheslav and Natalia went on vacation. One day, when both were drinking and talking, Vyacheslav found something on his friend's cell phone that shocked him. Videos of his 8-year-old daughter being sexually abused by him. When Vyacheslav confronted Oleg, he immediately fled. Vyacheslav took Oleg's phone to the police. On analyzing the device, they discovered that Vyacheslav's daughter was not the only victim. There were videos with 3 other girls, aged between 6 and 11, residents of Vintai. On several occasions, he had been seen with the girls in and around the village, but this never raised suspicions. It was common for Oleg to take care of his friends' daughters. One of the girls was the daughter of Oleg's ex-girlfriend, Oksana Kazakova. She had known Vyacheslav for over 15 years and only became aware of the abuse when the police discovered the videos. Everyone in the region started hunting for Oleg, including Vyacheslav. The search did not take long. Oleg's body was soon found in a forest on the outskirts of Vintai, in an improvised shallow grave. His body had several stabbing marks. Initially, Vyacheslav was arrested on suspicion of the crime. Information on this part of the story is not clear. Vyacheslav may have found Oleg before the police and beat him into surrender, but in the middle of the fight, Oleg managed to escape. Other sources say that he did not deny killing Oleg, but that it was not intentional. The explanation about what happened is the pedophile tripped over the knife during the fight. The murder charge, if convicted, could carry a sentence of at least 15 years in prison. However, there was an immense mobilization of local residents in Vintai, in neighboring villages, and many other regions around the country calling for his release. Vyacheslav was considered a hero who had saved the girls in his village from a predator. A crowdfunding campaign was set up to cover his legal costs. In addition, a petition gathered more than 2,500 signatures asking that Vyacheslav not be indicted for any crime. Even influential figures in Russia, such as journalists and the former presidential candidate, Ksenia Sobchak, spoke about the case in defense of the accused. Popular pressure was such that Vyacheslav was released shortly afterwards. He had to wear an electronic ankle bracelet until his trial. Sometime later, new analyses were carried out on Oleg's body. The report stated that the evidence indicated that the victim had self-flagellated, that is, he stabbed himself. It was speculated that the man killed himself after his meeting with Vyacheslav. He could turn himself into the authorities or deal with Vyacheslav's fury. With no way out, Oleg had taken his own life. This sounded very strange. It appeared like something was being covered up. No one could explain how he ended up in a shallow grave. Did he dig his own grave? Vyacheslav was tried for inciting suicide and sentenced to 18 months in prison, a much lighter sentence than the 15 years he would have served for a murder conviction. The story of Vyacheslav and Oleg serves as a wake-up call. We always need to be cautious about the people we have in our life and who we allow to get close to our family because they may not be who they appear to be.